Hey everybody, it's Alan here, and today I'm going to work on some narrow leaf ficus pre-bonsai. And every one of these, with the exception of perhaps very few, are in old food containers. So I take food containers, and after I finish eating what's in there, I save them. And now this container here, I've already started working on this guy, so he's just going to pop right to there. This container here looks pretty ragged, pretty nasty, but that is actually from the hailstorm of April 28th, 2023. So as far as UV tolerance, this particular plastic, which has a 1 in the triangle, which is PETE, which stands for polyethylene tetraethylene, has excellent UV tolerance. And then all I do is I take an awl like this and just poke holes for drainage. And these are fantastic shallow training pots. So this first tree has 2 liters and it has some massive roots. And I've decided to take it to this leader here. I'm going to take off this entire top. So that will shorten this tree tremendously. It will also mean that this massive root here comes off. So take that guy off. Like that. And then take this root off. The root may need a couple of cuts. Well, nope, didn't. Okay. So that's garbage. I guess I could do a root cutting with that. Maybe I'll save it and see what happens. But for now, we're just going to throw it over there. So we now have a pretty spinny looking thing. So I'm going to chop it to about right there. So this could actually end up being a mame. Might be a shohin. But it's going to be a small tree. And then I have another food container. Get rid of this guy. You know, in theory, at this time of year, middle of July, end of July, I could root those, but I have enough of them, so don't think I'm going to root any of them. So I now have another food container. This is the bottom, and this is the top, and I've already cut them apart. And this held like a muffin or a piece of cake or something like that. So I'm going to use what was the top of the food container to pot this guy up. About like that. And then I have my own homemade organic soil, which is leaves that I rake out of my yard that I then put into a pile and let them dry and age. And then I run them through my sifters. And then I also add a little bit of inexpensive bagged potting soil. And then another little bit of commercial soil that I buy in bulk from the old suppliers that I used to deal with when I was in the landscaping business. And that's about it. It looks pretty forlorn. Just that little guy. So that's the first one. And narrow leaf ficus are super able to just produce all kinds of adventitious buds. So this guy could bud out with 10, 20 different sprouts along both this smaller section and the bulbous part. And then I can choose the ones that I want to start to create the tree. So that's number one. This second one is very similar. It has 2 leaders, and this one kind of goes way off, kind of weird, and this one is a little straighter, a little more upright. So I'm going to take this one off here and then cut this one to about there. And then when we look at the roots, look at all that moss. I think that's from the transparency of the container. That's one thing about these. They are not opaque, but you see all this circling roots. So all that comes off. Already getting ficus goo on my fingers. Then we have another just massive root. And I think that it's probably not the best idea to put narrow leaf ficus into these very, very shallow containers, because the surface roots are exposed to the sun and then they just become massive and a little bit too out of proportion with the rest of the tree. So that guy comes off. Shorten this one. Just a stick again. And let's use our, this is the bottom that I just used the top for the first one. So it's going to be a little bit deeper, which I think will help this guy. And I'm also going to cut it this way because it wants to sort of lean that way, so now the new growth will come spreading out this way. Once again, I don't really need the tops. Fill it with my homemade landscape mix. And so there's the second one, and yes, it did go down in just a stump, but that's how I grow my bonsai. I let them grow way out and then I chop them way back, especially in the early stages. That's how I produce taper and movement. And their folia are just hefty trees. They get very thick bulbous trunks very quickly. So let's go get another one. This third one actually got cut back already. So you can see that cut back right there. And because it got cut back, imagine it was just a stump. It's got all this extra growth here. This is what Ficus nerifolia do. They just sprout all over the place when you make a main cutback. So the two that I just turned into stumps will do the same thing. And then you have just so many different branches to choose from to create whatever style you're trying to do. And this guy is in a little deeper, more square container, but it still has a tremendous amount of circling roots. So those all need to come off. There's some very low growth that I'm also going to take off. And I think I may just leave it, all the rest of it. It's actually got another chop right there. Okay, so big chop right here, and then another chop right there. So this is far more along. You know, if I cut this away and cut this away, you know, they call it the commercial cut. It would look very bonsai-like. So like that, and hey, nice bonsai. Of course, it doesn't have the kind of branching and movement that I want, but it's just that one chop created much more buds. So that's always interesting. And the container, once again, has some damage right here and right here. And this whole section right here is like just hanging off. But that's all from the hail. The hail really beat up a lot of things. In fact, I had a ceramic bonsai pot that the hail snapped the corner right off. So that was interesting. But as far as degradation, very little degradation from UV. So I'm going to put it right back in that same container. So it appears as though all these circling roots are coming from right here. So I'm going to take that guy away. And we had a massive amount of rain last night, so that's why the soil mix is so incredibly wet. Because holy cow, did it rain. Thankfully, because we still had a pretty dry summer. We've had good rain, but there's been periods of dry where if you look at the drought map for Florida, there are still sections of Florida, including where I live, that are considered abnormally dry. Okay. And I would never dream of doing this about another month and a half from now, September. You would create conditions that could actually kill the tree. But since we're still in July, we're still getting good rain. It's very warm. Taking a tree back this heavy should be no problem. Okay, get rid of the crud. And like I said, I'm just going to use the same pot. May angle it a little bit. And what a difference from the old soil to this nice new soil. And you notice I'm really not even pushing it down, just flattening it out, making sure it stays below the rim so that water doesn't wash away. And even though these trees have some major trunk chops, I'm still going to give them a good fertilization, because Nerofolia are just, they're tough plants, they're resilient, so they can respond from pruning like this as long as it's hot and humid and rainy like it is, and they will respond quite nicely. And let's do one more. And this one is also in a very shallow tray that once again has been beat up by the hail. And this tree has some interesting roots, very large roots. It looks like this root here either died back or got cut back. So I'm looking at the front like this, and I may keep this root just as a little kind of a little visual interest, see what happens. And it's also incredibly tall, just goes up and up and up and up and up. And these guys are just in training, they're just growing, they're just there. So not that big of a deal that it's this tall, because most of it's coming off. And actually there's a little tiny tuft of growth right there. So do I cut it to there? Sure, why not? In this super early stage, you really can't make a mistake. You know, I could cut it way down here, I could cut it further up here, but you notice this is all stovepipe. No taper here at all. So I'm going to take it to that little tuft of growth, trying not to kill that tuft of growth. And then let's see where we're at with the rest of the roots. Get rid of that guy. Okay, I am going to reduce this root some. To about right there. And I'm not going to put it into the same container. It will be a very similar container, but it's going to be a little bit deeper. So let's get rid of the old soil. Push it to the side. Make sure none of my tools are hidden under that old soil, because then I throw them away. That's happened before. People have lost tools by having a mass of old soil that the tool was underneath. They didn't realize. Throw it in the yard trash, and next thing you know, what happened to my concave cutters? Okay, so this is, you see where it says 1 right there, PETE, and they work well. It was all an experiment, but I'm super happy with how UV tolerant they are. And then another interesting thing about this is I'm the one who decides how much drainage it gets. So I could put a hole like every single thing and it would drain like crazy, or I could do fewer holes. So I'm pretty much in control of how much drainage these guys get. And I like to give them pretty decent drainage. It's very rare that I skimp on drainage holes. And once again, this is just an awl, just a regular, typical awl that you can buy at any hardware store. And there we go. Now, there is a difference between this one and the old one. The old one was almost perfectly square. So much like a round pot, square pot really has no front. And now this one will have a front. However, in training, I don't really worry about that all that much. There's always the ability to change the front of any tree in training, even trees that are not in training. But there we go. I think I like that. So now it's going to come up into here and it'll have some very nice movement. It'll still be an upright tree. It's not going to slant, even though the main trunk is slanting right now. But that would just add to the movement of the tree. And when I do this, I have to, first of all, I have to know my material. I understand that Nerifolia burst out with new growth after a major cutlet like this, just all over the place. And that it's the perfect time of year, height of the summer. And that they can take massive trunk chops like that and recover. No problem. In fact, I did a tree the other day. A much older, mature tree that I sawed about 75% of the roots off of the root mass, and I actually sawed almost all of the actual roots and just left it as a stump. And you know what? I'm going to go get that one just to show you how it's doing. And at the end of this video, I'll send you a link to watch that video. So I'll go get that tree, and then we'll call it a day. So here is a much older established ficus that really has beautiful form, that I cut virtually all the roots off of. And I will show you the root ball here. You can take Ficus nerifolia roots, and possibly other trees. I haven't really used this technique on a lot of trees, but I will leave you the link to the video of me chopping this thing. And man, I really chopped it. And as you can see, it's now a certain period of time. What is it, probably 2-3 weeks? And the only real consequence of chopping the roots that severely on this old mature tree was that it did lose some leaves. It lost a few leaves. But really, other than that, there's really no consequence at all. It has just kept right on going. It did drop all the fruit too. It had quite a few fruit, and the root chop also resulted in the tree dropping all that fruit because it wanted to survive and it doesn't need to produce fruit. And this is the root cutting that I took from that tree. So I don't know if we can imagine. I'm thinking, no, actually it doesn't look like that. But anyway, you can see this is about half the thickness down. So now this is basically a cutting. So just like taking a regular cutting, like if I chopped up here and took a cutting, I don't expect to see sprouts on this thing for another 6 to 8 weeks. And it could be even longer than that. But once again, the season is right. It's the perfect time of year to do this. And it will begin to sprout. And typically what happens with those root cuttings is that they sprout in many, many different places. So typically you end up turning them into group plantings, either a clump style or forest style. So the 3 that I just showed you, was it 3 or 4? 4. The 4 that I just showed you where I really whacked them back hard is pretty similar to this older tree, much older tree. Ficus nerfolia can handle that kind of chop. So that's it for this video. I do hope to show you the progress of this guy as it begins to sprout. And like I said, on our older tree, I love this tree. It's got beautiful movement, great branching. All I did was drop a few leaves, maybe a third, and now it's just right back, and the fruit. So there you go. Ficus nerfolia are just absolutely fantastic tropical bonsai, and they're definitely one of my very favorite ficus. So thanks for watching, and I will see you again in the next video.